How nervous are you for this game coming up tonight?
Well, first off, let me answer that question by saying this. Fritzy sounds very much like Bill Belichick when he calls in for these radio hits. So I just want you to know it's a very similar demeanor from Fritzy and Bill Belichick. They almost sound like the same person. But in regards to tonight's game, there's some nerves there. I mean, look, this is a really good Penn State football team. Notre Dame's banged up. I think if you look at the matchup of these two teams, it's going to come down to the effectiveness of running the football and stopping the run. And I think if you look at Penn State, they've got a couple of backs in Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, who's been phenomenal. Their tight end, Tyler Warren, will be a part of that rushing attack. And for Notre Dame, Riley Leonard and Jeremiah Love, his health and status is obviously of some concern. He's an incredible player. Jadarian Price can kind of take over that load, along with Williams as well, the freshman. But this is going to be a good game. The spread's tight for a reason, and I think it's going to be potentially a really ugly game to watch, though, Dan, when it's all said and done.
Meaning?
Defensive football. I think you're going to see a lot of back and forth punting. Special teams will play a role. I'll be shocked if they give Notre Dame's returners opportunity to actually return the football, given that if there's one distinct advantage for Notre Dame this game, it is their special teams play, especially the way it's been throughout the course of the year. Field goal kicking hasn't necessarily been as good consistently, but Jeter was great, obviously, in the most recent game.
So Brady will be on the field tonight. Urban Meyer, Matt Leinart, Vince Wilfork. That'll be pregame. I was wondering about, or how you thought, being a former Notre Dame athlete, James Franklin was at the press conference with Marcus Freeman, and he says, hey, no offense to you, but, everybody should be in a conference. So there's only one school that you're talking about when you say everybody should be in a conference here. Do you see a scenario at any point in the next 5 years where Notre Dame is in a conference?
I don't, and I think there's only two ways that hand would be forced. The first would be if they weren't able to play for a national championship in football if they weren't a part of a conference. So if that ended up being the case, that would force Notre Dame to have to make that decision. I think the next thing would be the economics of it. If Notre Dame didn't have a television partner like NBC that is able to, single-handedly help, promote their brand, their school, and the university, that would be probably the other thing, is if the economics become so big in favor of joining a conference that you'd be playing at a huge disadvantage. Because with the NBC contract, the partial affiliation with the ACC, that's just not the case as of now. And in fact, if you look at their advancement through the college football playoff, while all these other teams are, making money, but they have to share it with the rest of the conference, Notre Dame pockets all of it. And that's a huge advantage for them. In particular, even, not having to play a conference championship game, and then having to play a first-round game, because they're going to be making money off that. Not only hosting one if they are good enough to host a game like this season, but also if you're looking at, the subsequent rounds and all the money they'll be keeping in their pockets.
This whole thing about, and I've railed on this for a while, about conference championship games. I know it's a money grab, but every conference either has to have a conference championship game or not. And I wonder if we get to the point where, can these conference championship games be a first-round bowl game? Can we add more importance to it, as opposed to, they're trying to diminish the outcome. Hey, Penn State lost to Oregon. No big deal. You get to still, be a top seed here. I'm wondering the future of these conference title games.
No, to your point, it does feel like it's a money grab, in reality. And I think if you look at the attendance, too, in some cases, I mean, it's a lot on the fans. It's hard to get probably the environment that you want, knowing that we now have an expanded playoff and there's going to be an additional home game, or you're going to be traveling to, one of the New Year's Six games at some point, the quarterfinals and the semifinals, and then the national championship, if you're so lucky to get there. So there's a lot of economics that it's hitting the pockets of fans and some of the teams that are a part of it, but there's also the television portion of it. And I do think you bring up a good point. How necessary are these conference championship games? Because it felt exclusive to college football. As this model looks closer and closer to the NFL playoff system, you sit there and go, well, they have a regular season where they just determine who wins the division. They don't need to play off with the top two teams at the end of the season to determine that. They've already got that figured out. You could do the same thing with the conferences. The only tough part about saying that is you only have 4 teams in a division. And these conferences now are so big that it's almost an apples to oranges comparison in looking at, for example, the schedule Ohio State played versus, for example, the schedule Indiana played within the same conference. So because of that, you start to look at those things and go, all right, maybe it's harder than we thought to just determine who the conference champion is. And there's going to be a lot of years where you have a tie. I mean, the Big 12 went through this back when they didn't have their conference championship game. Remember, the slogan was the one true champion. And then you had Baylor and TCU tie the first year of the playoff, and then neither made it in the playoff because the Big 12 couldn't even decide who their conference champion was.
We're talking to Brady Quinn, Fox Sports college football analyst. He is part of the Orange Bowl Hall of Fame committee, joining us on the program.
Very prestigious, Dan. It's very prestigious. I chair it. I actually had a big part, along with the rest of the committee, in getting our 3 selected Hall of Fame inductees in there today. So if it just so happens that even though it's an ESPN broadcast, they're going to have to maybe put a couple of Fox Sports Big Noon Kickoff guys on TV at some point. I may or may not have played a role in that.
Okay, so Urban and Matt Leinart and Vince Wilfork are going into the Orange Bowl Hall of Fame.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And you're hoping that you get some kind of acknowledgement on ESPN with the Fox Big Noon Kickoff.
I'm not saying I'm hoping anything. I'm just saying it might be hard to cover a game and then not cover, 3 historic figures in this, tradition, the history of the Orange Bowl, to not include acknowledging that at some point. Like, hey, Urban Meyer and Matt Leinart and Vince Wilfork are here because they're being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Like, it seems like if you're ESPN, granted, they make some mistakes, but if you're ESPN, you probably want to include that at some point in the broadcast. Maybe I'm wrong. Handicap
Ohio State, Texas.
I would say the line sitting right now at 6 at this point. I think, again, it comes down to like both these teams playing to their potential. We've seen Ohio State do that the past 2 weeks, and everyone goes, my goodness, that's the best team in the country, and it's not even close. And on the flip side, we watch Texas, and it feels like at times, not that they get disinterested, and, I'm not going to play on that narrative, but it doesn't feel like they ever play up to their potential. So I don't know if they can find that, if Quinn Ewers and this offense can find more of that consistently, find more of that like big play ability to break off, versus Ohio State like they did and have so far in this playoff. I mean, it's like between Oregon and Tennessee, and they put their foot on the gas. It's not even close. And I obviously have a ton of respect for Dan Lanning, the job he did at Oregon this year. So that, to me, that Ohio State team, it's more about, can they continue the momentum? Can they continue to keep playing at the level which they have now the past 2 games? If they have, no one can touch them. Like, this spread, in my opinion, should be like 9.5 if Ohio State's going to be the team we saw the first 2 games so far in the playoff.
What if Quinn Ewers wins the national championship and then has to leave Texas?
It's a great hypothetical to throw out there, but if he's leaving Texas after winning the national championship, he's going to be going to the draft. Like everyone wants to make this like some big conversation about, the Arch Manning, and he's going to be the guy next year. And then that's all, true. But if I'm Quinn Ewers and then that scenario plays itself out, I'm looking at this quarterback draft class and going, hold on a second. Like, Shedeur looks to be the number 1 guy based on the tape and film and all that, but like, why can't Quinn be the next guy based on these evaluations? He's played really well throughout his career in big games. He's got the arm strength. He's got the ability. He's been tough this year playing through injury. I'm not sure in a year where, with the tape that Carson Beck put out there, he's coming off an injury. Cam Ward was special and dynamic, but people are going to have concerns, about, operating an NFL offense, all those things that come up that people try to, draw and take away from what they see on tape. And so why not, if you're Quinn Ewers, try to be a part of this quarterback draft class, playing on all that momentum that you would be getting off a national championship?
Is Riley Leonard an NFL quarterback?
I think so. And look, I think there's still parts of his game that are developing. He reminds me a lot of Ryan Tannehill. When you go back to Ryan, who played wide receiver at his time at Texas A&M, then transitioned into a quarterback. Now, I think Ryan had, in his final time at Texas A&M, displayed himself as much more of a passer at that point. But if you look at Riley, I mean, he's getting to a team in his, final year of play, and he's got to learn a new offense. He's got to develop chemistry with these guys. And there's a lot of moving parts to all that. And so I think there's going to be people who are going to be able to watch the tape and say he's an incredible athlete, he's a good leader, he's obviously tough, he has all these intangibles we're looking for, obviously the size, and he has the arm strength. It's just there's things they got to hone in on in regards to how he sees the field, how he processes, and in particular throwing down the field. That's one of the things that I think stands out to me is they haven't been able to be as successful over 10 yards downfield consistently within the offense. And again, there's a lot of reasons to that, but I think he's got the capability of playing at the next level.
If Bill Belichick asked for advice, what would you tell him?
Oh, man. I would tell him, why the hell are you asking me for advice? That's what I'd say. I'd be like, you already got problems. If you're like, let's just start with this. Like, where did you go wrong? Like, I'd probably turn it back around him and be like, who gave you bad advice, or why? Who told you to ask me something? I guess the first thing I would say is, It's so hard because we're assuming he's the head coach in North Carolina, right? We're not assuming he's going to potentially leave for an NFL job, which still baffles me that, someone hasn't hired him in the past 2 years. If that's the case, I would say the number one thing is he has to go find a quarterback. Like, evaluate the roster, and you can, construct the roster through NIL and high school recruits and all that, but he needs to find a veteran guy who can get through the portal, the best guy possible, and then he needs to go attack and get one of these stud guys coming out from high school. And you need to have at least a couple guys there to provide you depth and ability, but also for stability. So that would be the number one thing that I'd say. If you look at a college game, like, I would actually say the college quarterback is more paramount than even an NFL quarterback to a degree, and people might take issue with that. But I just think the way the game is played nowadays and the advantage that the elite quarterback at college gives you over even at the NFL, we got to go up against good defenses, and the offensive line matters even more. There's all these other parts play a factor. I mean, if you have an elite quarterback, like, you really can go far. And I think Cam Ward's an example of that. Like, how many of those other players at Miami this year are you looking at saying, well, those guys are draftable, or those guys are going to be, top picks? And I think without him this year, they're probably a 5-win team. And then it's a dramatically different conversation when Cam Ward gets there. So I would say he's got to go address that position first and foremost with an older, experienced guy if he has to, through the portal, and then obviously a high school guy.
Have fun tonight. And don't be like, somebody's on the field at ESPN. Are you going to be like jumping behind them and jumping up and down? You're not going to be waving or anything? Okay.
No, it'll be hard to miss. I'll be wearing my orange jacket down there. So if you look down, they're like, why is he wearing orange? Like, what? Like, not a lot of people know that I'm on the Orange Bowl committee. So it's always funny to see the response from people when you wear those orange jackets, because they do stand out. It's tremendous marketing. But then it always comes with, like, who are you rooting for if you're wearing orange? I'm like, well, I've got my ND stuff on underneath, but I'll be wearing an orange jacket during the presentation.